Are you someone who is drawn to science because you're curious about understanding the way things work? You want to tinker with and maybe reverse engineer different systems? And maybe you really appreciate the ability to build and create something new. Well, I'm Professor Kunjapur, and in this week's episode of the SynBio Transcript, I'm going to tell you about how, one, you can do all of those things with biology, two, you can get a really great and fulfilling career out of it, and three, you can help solve some of society's biggest problems this way.
Welcome to today's episode, which attempts to define synthetic biology and focuses more on why engineering biology can be really cool, useful, and maybe even essential for the future of humanity. My PhD advisor, Chris Prather, likes to say that if you ask 5 experts in the field what their definition of synthetic biology is, you'd get 5 different answers. And I think this is a reflection of just how intellectually diverse and inclusive the field of synthetic biology has become. Over time, synthetic biology has come to be more of an umbrella term. You can look at the word synthetic and see 2 pieces that apply to synthetic biology. Sometimes synthetic means to make things, like in synthetic chemistry, and a lot of synthetic biology is oriented around making things. But synthetic can also mean artificial or man-made, and that highlights how synthetic biological systems usually involve an element of engineering, something that is not already present in nature. To me, these ideas come together in one really broad interpretation of synthetic biology, which is making biology easier to engineer using a standardized framework. There are lots of different engineering frameworks that have been adopted by synthetic biologists, and here are just a few of them. So you can think of levels of abstraction or composability as breaking down a given product or function that we might be interested in making as enabled by a few different systems. And each of those systems are composed of different devices. And each of those devices are composed of even simpler and well-characterized parts that are all encoded by DNA sequences. You can also think about engineering prototyping applied to synthetic biology, where you have an initial concept or hypothesis, and you want to improve it through cycles of design, build, test, and learn. You can think of cells as programmable computing platforms, because in fact, they are taking in a variety of different stimuli, thermal, mechanical, chemical, and processing that information, and then performing functions in response. And so cells can be programmed to perform a variety of different functions that they don't already have, and that could be useful to us. This image depicts a cell as if it were like an electronic device. Yet cells are not pushing electrons around through copper wires, and they're not a blank canvas. In fact, the way that cells are moving around electrons and processing other kinds of functions is through chemistry. Cells are taking chemical inputs, and through them, they're using those chemicals for their materials and for their energy. And so the discipline, in addition to electrical engineering and computer science and other engineering disciplines, chemical engineers have actually made a lot of contributions to the analysis of cells when you think about them as chemical factories. Whether we think of cells as factories or computers, the key insight here is that biology can be technology. An interesting way to think about this is with this question that was once posed by Jason Kelly, the CEO and co-founder of a synthetic biology startup called Ginkgo Bioworks.
The question is, what is the most complicated technology on the table? Is it the laptop, the tablet, the smartwatch? And the interesting thing about this is that it's actually none of those 3. It's the houseplant. And it's the houseplant on a few different dimensions. When you think about what has the most precise features on the nanoscale, it's the plant. When you think about what can self-replicate, self-heal, it's also the plant. And when you also think about what technology can work for really long durations on the continent scale, once again, it's the plant. Whether it's a plant or a single-celled organism, biology is executing complex programs, the likes of which we as scientists and engineers can't even begin to make or understand it fully in other systems. Not only that, biology is software that's programming its own hardware. It's all autonomous.
At this point, you might be thinking, well, that's kind of interesting. I like technology, and now I see biology as technology. But what can I actually do with that? And how can I get a job? Well, that's where synthetic biology comes in. So let's talk about what kind of careers you can have in synthetic biology. What do synthetic biologists do? Let's start there. Synthetic biologists are tackling problems across a wide range of industrial sectors. These include food and beverage, textiles and fashion, healthcare, energy, fragrance and cosmetics, dyes and chemicals, bioplastics and materials, and environmental testing. There's also a lot more that's not shown here. So if I were to take a step back, what is generally happening is that there's something being produced that we need, a material, a fuel, something we might eat, and it's coming from some kind of source that isn't sustainable. Maybe it's coming from petroleum, or in the case of some of these plant-based meats, maybe it's coming from industrialized animal farming. Or maybe in some cases it's coming from agriculture, but in a really unsustainable way, really labor-intensive, water-intensive, or bad for the soil or the climate because of high fertilizer, etc. Synthetic biology is striving to be able to make things more sustainably using renewable inputs and mild processes to make things. But synthetic biologists don't just make the kind of common substances that we might use every day. They're also responsible for generating the next generation of therapies to prevent or treat disease, just like with the RNA vaccines or gene therapies or latest T-cell based cancer therapies. The other thing to just kind of think about here is sometimes the product doesn't necessarily have to be the thing that's made. It can tell you as a diagnostic if there's a problem, either say in the environment or in your body for human and environmental health. So synthetic biologists are doing all of these kinds of things and more. So what do you need to become a synthetic biologist? Well, you need at least your high school diploma and a bachelor's of science from your undergraduate degree, which could either be from engineering or through the natural sciences. If engineering, you're most likely to find synthetic biology curriculum as well as research labs in a chemical engineering department. Or if your school has a biological engineering department or biomedical engineering, it might be in those departments. Your other major choice could be for natural sciences, where you get a degree in molecular and cellular biology, biochemistry, and microbiology. There's a lot of synthetic biology research that occurs in these departments now, but something to just know about the natural sciences is it was originally more geared towards understanding the way that biological systems work rather than engineering them. That has changed, though, as I mentioned down here, if you have an engineering degree, you're more likely to find a job in this industry, as well as with a bachelor's degree in general. But you usually need a master's or doctorate degree to work in synthetic biology. So your master's degree usually takes anywhere between 1 to 3 years after your bachelor's. And just so you have a sense of a doctorate degree, that would probably be 5 or 6 years after your bachelor's degree, and it could include the master's along the way. Or in some cases, like for me, it just skips the master's altogether. One really important thing to know when you're working in synthetic biology or other areas of science and engineering is that you will be paid while earning your master's or PhD. So there's still an opportunity cost, especially if you're an engineer, because you could, with your bachelor's degree, often find a job right out of undergraduate, and instead you would be going to school, but you would be getting paid to go to school and not having to pay tuition, which helps a lot. The other thing is, at the end of the day, you're doing pretty well if you graduate with a PhD in a synthetic biology relevant area, the starting salaries with a PhD are often in the six figures.
Well, that is a wrap for this week's episode. I'm Professor Kunjapur signing off. Stay hungry, my friends, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks. Bye.